and we're going to do some gardening this meeting. And if you haven't guessed already, my talk is on Scandinavian beets. Beets, also known as Beta vulgaris or rödbetor in Swedish, have their likely origin in the Near East, appearing as early as the 200s in Central Europe. There was no mention of them in Sweden until the 1600s, and then only as delicacies on royal tables, often pickled with vinegar and horseradish. Eventually, beets started getting use in a multitude of ways in all the Nordic countries, Russia, and in Flemish kitchens. The Russian beet soup, borscht, is well known, while the Swedish biff a la Lundström is lesser known, but is much tastier. In today's Swedish kitchen, the beet is more common than the rutabaga or swede. Besides pickling beets, you can roast them in a hot oven, shred and saute them in olive oil and fresh herbs, finishing them with a little tarragon vinegar. Also shred them raw for use in salads and on sandwiches. Juice them and roast them whole. And there is also a spicy pickled beets recipe to try. There is even a beet burger, and that's Danish. Those in restaurants are usually made with boiled beets, then pureed and mixed with whatever other ingredients and fried on the flat top, much like any other burger. The result is generally a mushy mess in the center with an undesirable texture, much like baby food. Instead, you should shred the beets while raw into thin pieces. Try using a mixture of golden beets and red beets for both taste and presentation. Then saute them on the pan, almost similar to hash browns. Beets originate from European native flora. The ancestor of beets is the wild plant sea beet, having its natural habitat at seashores from the Mediterranean and southern Europe. However, individuals of the sea beet have recently been found more frequently also on Nordic shores, and these genotypes found in colder habitats contain valuable genes resistant towards beet necrotic yellow vein virus, which could be useful for the development of new varieties of beets. There are 4 main groups or forms of cultivated beets: leaf beet, fodder beet, garden beet, and sugar beet. The beet plant in different forms has been important in Nordic agriculture for centuries. The rather cold climates have traditionally limited the number of vegetable species available for food production. Different forms of the beet plant have been used for feed, food, and as an industrial crop. As an alternative to sugarcane, sugar beet has been important for sugar supplies in the temperate parts of the world, including the Nordic countries. Sugar beets were to some extent cultivated in Norway during the Second World War, but was later considered to be unprofitable. Commercial breeding of sugar beet cultivars has been going on in Denmark, Finland, and Sweden. Through reorganization and merging of companies, all Nordic sugar beet breeding is today taken care of the Marabou Seed Company in Denmark. In Norway, wild sea beet was found for the first time in 1991 and was thereafter been found at several new locations in the southeast part of the country. However, wild sea beet is not very winter hardy and has rapidly disappeared from many previous registered locations. And some good points of beets: they increase the levels of HDL cholesterol and reduce triglyceride levels. They also contain a compound, betaine, which reduces the levels of homocysteine. Beets reduce the risk of atherosclerosis, heart attacks, high blood pressure, and strokes. Beets are rich in an antioxidant compound, beta-cyanins, which counters the growth of cancerous cells. They prevent the due to harmful nitrosamine compounds and slow the rate of tumor development. Beets also contain high amounts of vitamin C, which is a potent antioxidant compound and prevents several respiratory disorders like the flu, coughs, and asthma. Vitamin C boosts immunity, stimulates the production of white blood cells, and even prevents the occurrence of cancer like lung cancer. And if you've ever handled beets, you are acquainted with their ability to color everything they touch. But they didn't color me right there. This feature made them perfect for decorative uses throughout the 1800s. Beet pigment is now a natural alternative to commercial food colorings and used in tomato paste, candy, and jams. While beets have many benefits, they do have a few drawbacks. Now, before you go out and stock your fridge full of beets, and side effects to consider. They are quite high in oxalates, which can reduce the absorption of some nutrients like calcium and iron. Too many oxalates can also increase the likelihood of kidney stones. They're relatively high in natural sugar, but one serving of a half a cup of beets has a negligible effect on blood glucose. They can surprise you the next day, too, in your urine and feces color. Beets not only stain countertops and garments, they also pass through the digestive tract for the next day or two. And this is such a frequent occurrence, it's known as beetora. Proper storage is essential for keeping beets fresh. Avoid beets with wilted greens, since this reduces shelf life. Scrub beets first and then dry them thoroughly before placing them in a bag. Store them in the drawer in your refrigerator, and they could stay firm for around a few months. Beet greens are tasty and nutritious as well, and might be used in the same way that you might use chard or spinach. To maintain beet greens, wash, dry, and wrap them in a paper towel and keep them in the fridge. They should be just fine for up to 2 weeks. And where I got the idea for doing beets was the
which edition was that?
it's from October 2020, which Oki had brought some, and yep, for to give, and I saw that and I said, oh, there's a tie. And it's titled Beets as the star of the show. And they have the recipe for the Danish beet burger. And they also have a recipe for spicy pickled beets. Quick pickling provides that kind of ease and immediacy. Simply bring your brine to a simmer and pour it over the prepared beets. Let them sit for 30 minutes and they are ready to go. No giant vats of boiling water, sterilizing of jars, or worrying about whether you've managed to achieve a proper seal. The only drawback is that quick pickled beets are not designed for long-term storage. They are tended to be stored in the refrigerator and polished off within a couple of weeks. But trust me, the person that wrote this, that won't be a problem. And there's a recipe for the spicy pickled beets and the pickled beet salad. And then I have my old receipt, 1880s receipt book. That's how they spelt it. And they have a recipe in here to make brandy from beetroot. I've never heard of that. I have this book, Bold Cooked and Authentic Historical Recipes and Practices. And they have in here recipe for beet wine. International cookbook, which also has a recipe in here I thought was interesting, Swedish tea cake. And then they have beet relish, Harvard beets and pickled beets. And then I found this book, Pickled, Potted, and Canned. They don't list beets in here at all. I couldn't believe it. But in Julia Child's book, she has a thing about beets in the pressure cooker. Whole beets take hours to cook in the oven, but only 20 minutes in the pressure cooker. Place 2-inch washed, unpeeled beets on the rack in the cooker with 1 inch of water. Bring to full 15 pounds pressure and time for 20 minutes. Set under the cold water faucet to release pressure immediately. Peel the beets while still warm. So there's so much can be done with beets. And I went to a class on pickling things, because Scandinavians love to pickle and ferment things. And they had this, they did this thing about beet kvass. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. And I tried it, because I picked up these beets for the tot. And it's very simple to do. You just take your beets, glass or ceramic thing, and salt. And you can use fermented brine, and if you're not using brine, you put additional salt in there. You let it ferment for 2 to 3 days, then you strain the beets and stuff out, and then you have the juice in the fridge, and people swear by that. It's like a health thing. They drink it every day. So I was going to give that a try, but the thing tipped and it leaked out, because they say that you don't want the stuff you're fermenting to touch metal. And I was afraid of the cover, so I put a plastic baggie on there, and it didn't seal quite right. So a lot of it spilled out into the plastic bags that I had this and the beets in. So I put that back in to bring the level up. So now I got to start again with some more beets. And so I'm not going to be able to try this yet for a while. It only takes a couple of days for it, but I got to start again. Any questions or comments? Now, somebody always comes up to me afterwards and has some interesting bit of information that they tell me that they should tell right now so everybody can hear it.
I'll tell you one thing. When I was really little, 8 or 9, I had asthma really bad. I was in the hospital in Boston. And my doctor, Dr. Baum, said to me, he just recently passed away in Worcester, and he said to me, Mary Ellen, don't you like beets? And I said to him, Irish family, what are beets? And he looked at my mother like, so, yeah, I never tried beets. I don't think I've ever had beets.
Oh, you can have it so many different ways. And actually, the person that wrote this article, she hated beets, pickled beets, the way her mother made them when she was growing up. And she took a cooking class. And everybody mentioned something that they didn't like. And she said, pickled beets. And the woman said, by the end of the class, you're going to love them. And she did. And there's so many ways you can have beets. And they're so good for asthma.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I can say that my aunt and uncle in Åland, Finland, they harvested and grew sugar beets. And then he won a lot of awards for it.
Wow.
And then they sold the farm part of it, but they're still live home. My aunt is still living in the house. She's in her 90s.
Wow.
But they had a true working farm, but their main crop was sugar beets.
Now, did they have any interesting recipes or anything that they used,
Not that I
or
know.
they just got sick of beets?
But we grew up, we always had beets. We had beets even here, my mom, we had beets a lot, yeah. That was one of the staples to have with a meal, especially with
Yep, the
meatballs.
Scandinavians love beets.
My father grew them every summer. Every summer, so we had beets and we had beet greens all the time.
I haven't tried beet
We
greens.
saved
Oh,
the beets in, sand, kind of sand, down in the cellar, and they last for a
Yep,
long time.
I can attest that beet greens are the most delicious thing, even better than spinach.
Gonna have
If
to
you haven't
try.
tried it, try it.
that.
They'll cook it just like spinach,
Mhm.
much better than kale.
They have some of the sweetness of the beet.
Oh.
With lots of butter.
Lots of
That's true.
And for those that aren't, for those that aren't aware of it, to get the sugar out of the beets, they shred them and process them for the sugar. Now you have a lot of this beet pulp that they've tried to figure out what can they do with the beet pulp with the sugar gone out of it? It's used for horse feed, for horses that have a breathing problem that's called heaves. Because a horse with heaves cannot have the hay. The dust and the hay gives them a lot of problem breathing. So I had a horse that had the problem, and we fed him beet greens mixed with brown sugar. That was one happy horse. But I could ride him and work with him, no problem.
Anything else?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.